Burkina Faso, a landlocked country nestled in the heart of West Africa, is grappling with a growing wave of violence and instability. Once known for its relative peace, Burkina Faso, with its population of 23 million, now faces a harrowing crisis that has sent shockwaves through its military and civilian populations alike. This small country, controlled by a military junta after a recent coup, has become a hotspot for militant attacks, the latest of which was a devastating strike on a military base. This week, an armed group, numbering around 100 militants, stormed a military installation in northern Burkina Faso. They wreaked havoc, looting and setting fire to everything in sight, leaving behind a chilling trail of destruction and a death toll of 50 soldiers. The attackers are suspected to be members of JNIM, Jamaat Nasr al-Islam wal Muslimin, an Islamist militant group with close ties to al-Qaeda. The rise of JNIM over the past few years has made it one of the deadliest groups operating in the region. This recent attack has not only highlighted the growing power and reach of militant groups within Burkina Faso, but also serves as a disturbing reminder of the increasing threat posed by extremist factions in the wider Sahel region. This brutal assault is only the latest chapter in a series of attacks that have plagued the country, which has seen an unprecedented rise in militant violence. Armed groups now control vast swaths of the country, particularly outside the capital, Ouagadougou, and much of the rural areas, where militants have taken control of key towns and villages. In many parts of the country, residents live in constant fear of sudden, violent raids by extremist groups that show no mercy. The military junta, struggling to hold the line, has been unable to stem the tide of violence that has shaken the nation to its core. Burkina Faso's military forces, although numerically significant, are ill-equipped and insufficiently trained to combat the well-armed insurgents who have become adept at guerrilla warfare tactics and rapid strikes. As the violence continues to spread, the impact on the civilian population has been catastrophic. Thousands of innocent lives have been lost, and the humanitarian crisis deepens with each passing day. Displacement has reached alarming levels, with over 1 million people forced to flee their homes in search of safety. The once peaceful countryside is now littered with displaced families, many of whom are now living in makeshift camps with little access to food, water, or medical care. Women and children have borne the brunt of this violence, and the fabric of society has been severely frayed. The military junta, which assumed power after a coup earlier in the year, faces significant challenges. The government's ability to respond effectively to the growing insurgency has been limited, not only by a lack of resources but also by political instability. The junta's leadership has struggled to gain the trust of the people, many of whom are disillusioned by years of political corruption, economic mismanagement, and now, an escalating insurgency. The instability has also further strained the relationship between Burkina Faso and international partners, who have voiced concerns about the erosion of democratic institutions and the increasing militarization of the government. In response to the growing unrest, Burkina Faso's military junta has called on the international community for support, particularly in the form of military assistance and humanitarian aid. However, the situation is complicated by the presence of multiple competing militant groups in the region, each with its own agenda and support base. The instability in Burkina Faso is part of a broader regional crisis that spans the Sahel, where countries like Mali, Niger, and Chad are also grappling with escalating violence from Islamist insurgents. As the international community watches on, there is increasing concern that Burkina Faso could become a failed state if the violence continues unchecked. The military junta's inability to restore order, combined with the rise of jihadist forces, presents a bleak future for the country and its people. The international community must respond with urgency and provide the necessary support to stem the tide of violence. However, this requires a nuanced and coordinated approach that not only addresses the security concerns but also focuses on the root causes of extremism, such as poverty, political instability, and a lack of opportunity. Without such efforts, the situation in Burkina Faso will likely continue to deteriorate, further destabilizing the region and contributing to the rise of a new generation of militants. The situation in Burkina Faso is part of a larger, more alarming trend across the Sahel region. This vast, arid stretch of land, which spans from the west coast of Africa to the east, has become a breeding ground for terrorist groups, including JNIM, al-Qaeda affiliates, and ISIS. These groups have escalated their attacks on both military and civilian targets, leaving thousands dead and displacing millions. The violence that has ravaged countries like Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger has not only destabilized the local governments but has also significantly impacted neighboring nations, further exacerbating an already volatile region. The Sahel is now home to a complex web of insurgencies, with multiple militant groups competing for dominance and resources, fueling even greater conflict and uncertainty. The Sahel, often referred to as the epicenter of global terrorism, accounts for more than half of all terrorism-related deaths worldwide. This alarming statistic highlights the scale of the violence and the urgency with which the international community must respond. Despite the region's vast natural resources, including gold, uranium, and oil, the Sahel remains one of the most impoverished areas in the world, fueling instability and providing fertile ground for extremist groups to exploit. The lack of economic development, high levels of unemployment, and poor governance have created a breeding ground for insurgents, who capitalize on the disillusionment of local populations. As a result, the region has become an increasingly attractive target for militant groups seeking to impose their ideological and political agendas. For JNIM and other insurgent groups, the region's vast resource wealth is a key motivator. Control over resources, as well as access to the coastlines of West Africa, which facilitates arms trafficking and smuggling, has intensified the fighting. This quest for control is not only about territorial gain but also about wielding greater power and influence in the region. As these groups vie for dominance, they continue to destabilize governments, pushing Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger deeper into a crisis that seems to have no end in sight. The relentless attacks on military bases, civilian infrastructure, and government officials are part of a broader strategy to undermine state authority and extend their control over the region. This has led to a worsening humanitarian crisis, with countless innocent civilians caught in the crossfire. Amidst all this violence, the military juntas that have replaced the civilian governments in Burkina Faso and Mali have struggled to maintain order, much like the regimes they replaced. The coups that brought these juntas to power were initially met with some hope that they would be able to bring stability to the region. However, the escalating violence has shown that the military-led governments are as ill-equipped to handle the insurgency as their civilian predecessors. These military governments, lacking both the legitimacy and resources to effectively combat the insurgents, have been unable to address the root causes of the conflict, such as poverty, corruption, and governance failures. As the violence escalates, the future of the region looks increasingly uncertain. With no clear path forward and insurgent groups like JNIM continuing their deadly campaign, the Sahel region remains on the brink of a full-blown crisis that could engulf even more nations. The already fragile states in the region are now at risk of collapse, and the threat of regional instability spreading to neighboring countries such as Chad and Mauritania is ever present. The international community must act with urgency, not only to address the immediate security threats but also to provide long-term solutions that promote economic development, governance reform, and regional cooperation. Without such efforts, the Sahel is likely to remain a hotbed of conflict and extremism, with devastating consequences for the people of the region and for global security as a whole. The road ahead remains fraught with challenges, but without a concerted and comprehensive approach to both the security and socio-economic dimensions of the crisis, the Sahel's future remains grim.